In this video, we'll wrap up our interview with Brett Guarino, VCDX number 256. He's continuing to teach us the core terminology and concepts that every VCDX candidate needs to know.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Watrous from VVork. If this is your first time here and you want to learn about automating, programming, and monitoring in VMware environments, you're in the right place. Start now by subscribing and clicking the bell so that you don't miss a thing. Okay, welcome back to this final part of our interview series with Brett Guarino, where we've been talking about core concepts and terms related to VCDX. This doesn't have to be the end of it though. If you have questions that you'd like answered about VCDX, please feel free to leave a comment in the YouTube section down below. But let's turn it back over to Brett here and see what he has to say about this design qualities stuff. What's this about, Brett?
So design qualities are part of your logical model, and they're going to be used to justify your design decisions that you're going to be making in a logical model based on your conceptual model inputs. So in your conceptual model, you're going to have your requirements, assumptions, constraints, and risks. And you justify the design decisions that you're going to make based on the requirements, right? Because in a constraint, the design decision has already been made for you. The customer said what you're going to do. But if you have a customer requirement, you have to come up with, as the architect, a design decision that addresses that particular requirement. Might be a particular version of a product or even just a product suite itself to address a particular need. It might be the idea that you're going to have so many physical NICs backing a particular distributed virtual switch. It could be any number of considerations. And these decisions that we make have an impact. Every time we make one of these decisions, we have to weigh the impact of that decision. And I literally mean every single decision you make, you must weigh the impact of it from the perspective of each one of these design qualities. And it's easy to remember these through a series of acronyms. I tend to use acronyms as mnemonics very often, just tools to help me remember things. The way that we've got these sorted on the slide, it's availability, manageability, performance, and recoverability and security. And you can see that as AMPRS using the initial letters. So I hear a lot of people refer to this as AMPers. A friend of mine who loves Italian food, he says PARMs. Personally, I like ramps. Call it what you want as long as you can identify what they are, okay? And that's largely what these are and how they're leveraged as an effective tool in justifying the design decisions we make.
All right, thank you, sir. But to tie these design qualities back to our first video in this series, in the first video, we were talking about things like conceptual design, logical design, physical design. Where do these design qualities fit in?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Arguably, they traverse all three, conceptual, logical, and physical. And again, if you put any number of architects together in the same room and ask that question, you're likely to get as many different answers as you have architects in the room. Whereas in some cases, you might find 2 or 3 architects who agree on one thing. I personally tend to say that these are my logical model justifications for my design decisions. Anytime I'm going to make a design decision, I want to ask myself the question, how does this decision impact the availability of my design? Will it ever cause me to violate my SLA in the event of a particular failure? Sometimes you'll have design decisions that have 0 impact on availability. Sometimes you'll have design decisions that have a massive impact on availability. When we look at manageability, manageability is one of those things that is potentially going to have an impact, and I want to weigh that consideration against my design decisions that I'm making. And I'm going to come back to manageability. Performance is one that's kind of easy to speak to, right? Performance is more asking the question of, is my design, to use an obvious word, performant, right? Is my design decision going to have an impact on performance? This is something like, do I have adequate CPU capacity when I'm operating at peak utilization? When we talk about recoverability, it's one of those things where in the event that there is a failure of my system such that the resources and the applications are not available, how long does it take me to get back up? And does that violate my SLA? Okay. When contrasted with availability, availability is a consideration of, in the event that there is a failure of some component or consideration of my design, does the system stay available? does my end user know that we have lost some component within the architecture? And if they don't know, that becomes largely an availability consideration. Whereas recoverability is, we definitely lost it. How long is it going to take us to get it back? And that gets into a discussion about your SLA, your recovery point objective, your recovery time objective, and some considerations around work recovery time, things of that nature, right? So we architect to address that and make sure that we are within the customer's expectations around an SLA for availability. And customers may have SLAs around performance as well. And you might have customers who just don't even have SLAs. Although that's highly unlikely, and I would not recommend someone go to a VCDX without having well-defined SLAs and consideration for these things. And security is exactly what it suggests. Security is largely going to kind of take care of itself for you if you have compliance requirements, because you're in a particular industry or sector that has, FIPS, for example, in government, or PCI compliance if you're responsible for some kind of credit card transactional data, or you're storing credit card data. Things like that are things that are going to have lots of guidelines around them that we have to address. If your design doesn't have a compliance requirement, then you absolutely must detail those same considerations within your design, addressing from this perspective of any singular design decision, how it impacts your security, architecture, consideration, and implementation. And that really goes for all of these.
Okay, let's wrap things up a bit here. In the previous videos, you mentioned some resources such as the VCDX Blueprint and the VCDX Mentorship Program. Any other resources that we should mention here, or should I just plop the same ones down into the YouTube comment section down below? Or actually, I mean the YouTube description section.
Yeah, I would say one of the things, and this goes out again to VCAP design candidates as well as VCDX candidates, when considering manageability from the perspective of the VCDX blueprint, it very clearly spells out that manageability is 3 key things. And a lot of people just assume manageability is ease of use. It's absolutely not ease of use. In some capacity it is. But manageability is lifecycle management, it is capacity planning, and it is scalability. It's those 3 key elements. And where did I get that from? The VCDX blueprint. Okay. So when you speak to manageability and you're justifying your design decisions, you want to make sure that you are doing it from those perspectives. And that just gives one example of one of the golden nuggets inside of the VCDX blueprint that I promise you I personally overlooked in my first defense, and in some capacity my second defense as well. I finally passed on my third one, thankfully.
And of course, we knew all along that you would, Mr. VCDX 256. Okay, so again, we're going to wrap this up here. We've got lots more videos coming on VVork. But again, quick reminder, if you have any other questions specifically about VCDX, please drop them into the YouTube comment section below. And good luck, everyone, pursuing your VCDX. This is the end of our interview with Brett Guarino, but it's not the end of the discussion. If you have other questions about VCDX, let me know what they are down in the YouTube comments below.